All right. I'm Todd McKay. This is Canadian Taxpayers Podcast. We got Franco Terrazzano here today. He is our federal director. Inflation numbers. They've got you hot and bothered, Franco. Let's just be honest about you. That's one of the ways to get under your skin is inflation. Here's a clip with you talking about it.
Franco Terrazzano is the National Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. In a release that he put out late yesterday afternoon, which is why I'm knocking on his door this morning, the headline is, Taxpayers Demand a Plan to Fight Soaring Cost of Living. Franco Terrazzano, good morning to you. A great headline. Have you had any early response from the government?
No, nothing from our politicians in Ottawa, who almost seem like they're oblivious to what's going on, the challenges that us everyday Canadians are facing. You know, there's so many issues going on right now, but I do think perhaps the economic issue of our day facing just regular working Canadians is inflation, and just the fact that our paychecks seem to be buying less and less, our savings seem to just be absolutely eroded. And you know what? It doesn't take a PhD in economics to understand why these prices are soaring, right? We've seen massive amounts of money printing. We've seen massive and unprecedented amount of government spending, and we continue to see taxes go up even during the middle of a pandemic.
All right, Franco, thanks for taking the time to chat with us, getting us on the list of people for you to talk to. So break it down a little bit. What's the Coles Notes? What's going on with inflation numbers right now?
Yeah, well, we just got another round of consumer price numbers from Stats Canada. Prices have gone up 4.7% over the last year, which is the highest price increase in nearly 2 decades. But Todd, I mean, that Stats Can report is essentially just telling us, any Canadian who's been to the grocery store or been to a gas station lately, what we already know. And that is that the cost of living is going up, and that our paychecks are buying less and less.
Okay. So that's a big problem. And it's an interesting thing. Usually when problems like that hit the pocketbook, hit the kitchen table, hit the family budget, usually that's a big deal, and politicians can't wait to say something about it. Sometimes it's smart, sometimes it's not. Usually they want to say something. So the politicians, we've got a problem. Politicians love to say they've got solutions. What are the politicians saying about this?
Well, they're really not saying much. They're falling asleep at the wheel while Canadians get soaked with higher prices. But it's even worse than that, because they're really adding insult to injury by making these tough times tougher. During this pandemic, we've already seen the Trudeau government raise its carbon tax twice, and another carbon tax is right around the corner. Next April, the carbon tax is going up again. But to make matters even worse, by 2030, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's carbon tax is going to be soaking us for about 40 cents per liter of gasoline. Then he's going to be imposing a second carbon tax through fuel regulations. So it really doesn't look good for drivers. And what is the official opposition saying about these rising gas prices? Well, not much. And that's because their leader, Conservative Party leader Aaron O'Toole, he also wants to increase the carbon tax. He also wants to hit Canadians with a second carbon tax. Now, Todd, there are some politicians saying the right thing. You've got the finance shadow critic, Pierre Poilievre. He's saying, hey, we've got to print less. Government borrowing has to go down. But the problem is, even O'Toole wants to spend about $50 billion more than the last Liberal government budget.
Yeah, that's a real problem. We do see some politicians talking about the issue of inflation, very few talking about the solution. And it's not just the pain at the pump when we're fueling up. Everything in the grocery store got here with trucks and that kind of thing. That's how we heat our homes. Those numbers pushing up on gas prices are pushing up everything else as well. Okay, but listen, we don't live in a vacuum. It's not like our politicians are the only ones in the world. And inflation isn't just a Canadian problem. We're seeing that around the world as well. What are other countries doing about inflation?
Well, it turns out that politicians can provide a little bit of relief. Yeah, who would have thought living here in Canada that politicians could actually make life a little bit more affordable? But turns out it can be done, because we're seeing it in a place like South Korea. For example, they just announced that they're reducing gas taxes by 20%. We also see India reducing gas taxes. Now, close to home here in Ontario, Premier Doug Ford, he's doubled down on his promise to reduce gas taxes before the next budget. So that's something that our Ontario Director, Jay Goldberg, he's going to be holding his feet to the fire on that one. So politicians can provide a little bit of relief. They can provide relief immediately, because we have to remember that taxes make up between 31 and 42% of the pump price. So, hey, these politicians want to do something to help us out. They need to take a look in the mirror. They need to reduce some taxes.
Yeah, especially I was just glancing at some of the StatsCan numbers that came out. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's about 25% jump in transportation costs. That was one of the biggest price jumps and driving all of the other prices up. Also, I had to laugh. President Joe Biden in the States, he was getting in on this stuff a little bit too. He was asking OPEC to pump more oil to try to get fuel prices down and get inflation under control in the US. If only there were some way to get oil from a friendly neighbor, maybe to the north. Maybe we could have helped old Joe out there. All right, let's not go too far down that path. Inflation. Look, nerds like you love this stuff. Let's just be honest about that. You would look at this stuff for fun, even if it didn't matter to your own pocketbook. But for the rest of us who aren't nerds, why is inflation so dangerous?
Well, we talked about right at the beginning of the segment, right? Prices are up 4.7% over the last year. That means our paychecks can't buy as much, right? That means our savings don't go as far, especially if you're retired. It's not like you can just jump back into the job market. What if you're on fixed income, right? You are really getting hit hard here. Or even if you're just trying to save up for retirement, right? Put maybe 10% of your paycheck aside for your golden years. Well, that money that you're putting aside isn't going to buy as much. And I think that's really the human element of this inflation. We see prices rise. We have to remember that the hard work that we're putting into those paychecks just don't really go as far.
Yeah, and that costs everybody a lot. And it costs some of the people who can afford it the least, costs them the most. And that's the really, truly unfair part of inflation. Okay, we've talked about the problems a lot. We got to talk about the solutions a little bit. All right, smart guy, what would you do to fix this?
Well, there's a few different things. Let's just start with the cost of living, right? What's the immediate way? The immediate way tomorrow we could see some price relief would just be to reduce some taxes, right? We've talked about carbon taxes going up. That's the wrong direction if you want to provide relief, right? Right away, our politicians could provide relief at the pumps and reduce some taxes. We've also seen alcohol taxes go up twice during the pandemic. Well, hey, you want to help us out a little bit? Stop the booze escalator tax. So that's number one. Number two is you got to take that printing press out of overdrive. Right? During this pandemic, we've seen the Bank of Canada print up and create 370 billion new dollars. And guess what? The more that the government prints in new dollars, the less that your dollars buy. And really that boils down to an important point that we really just need to see the government, the federal government, stop borrowing so much money. That really is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and in order to do that, we've got to get spending under control. If we could even just get it down to pre-pandemic spending levels, which were already crazy bananas high, a lot of this would be a lot better. The alternative, and we've seen this throughout history, is the central banks are prone to increase interest rates in order to try to curb inflation. That's also dangerous, though. A lot of people have mortgages that they're just barely holding on to. We've got to get the government moving in a better direction on better ideas, like slowing down a little bit on the taxes and the spending, and try to get this under control. All right, Franco, thanks for looking into all the nerd stuff. Really appreciate your help, and stay tuned, folks. I think we're going to be talking about inflation for a while.
Hi, I'm Scott Hennig, president of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. If you've got another minute, I'd like to ask you to think about the one person you know that would really enjoy listening to this podcast. Do us a favor and do them a favor and send them a quick note to let them know about it. At the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we believe there is power in numbers. That's why we've worked so hard to build an army of taxpayers who are ready to push back. And we did it because people like you shared our work with that one person that they knew would really appreciate taking part. Thanks for listening. And thanks for doing your part to make Canada a better place.